By looking at those pictures with the graph, you may know what is I am going to teach you right now. Yes, I am right now going to teach you about angina, how it happened, the pathophysiology of the angina, and the coronary blood flow and the coronary oxygen supply demand imbalance, how it changes with time to time. Before I am going into topic, I would like to ask, what are the risk factors for developing of ischemic heart disease? The risk factors for developing of ischemic heart disease. Yes, then the people who are watching this video can tell, and once I tell those things, you can check whether it is correct or not. Sometimes I also can be correct, but you have to recorrect by commenting below. Okay, the risk factors for developing of coronary myocardial infarction or ischemic heart disease. The risk factors I will divide into three types. Risk factors. Number one is non-modifiable. Number two, modifiable. Modifiable again I divide into two types. One with the proven one, thus non-proven, but is thought to be proven. The recent trial also shows some proven benefit, but we have to do more trials. Those are also we have to do. Those are also we have to modify. When coming to non-modifiable risk factors, the unfortunate one is male gender. Being a male gender, have a high risk of developing myocardial ischemia. So, number one male gender, male person, and the positive family history. Number two, age. Family history. Those are non-modifiable risk factors. You can change surname, but you can't change the family history. So, male gender, advanced age, and family history are the non-modifiable risk factors. The modifiable risk factors which are proven to be helpful in reducing the incidence of myocardial ischemia are hypocholesteremia, high cholesterol, hypertension, high cholesterol, hypertension, and cigarette smoking. If you are going to reduce the cholesterol level, reduce the risk of myocardial injury. And hypertension, if you are going to control the hypertension, again will be beneficial. And cigarette smoking also, cessation of cigarette smoking will help in reducing the myocardial incidence. In addition to that, the modifiable risk factors which are thought to be effective but not that much proven, those are diabetes mellitus. Now you have to put that one into this group. Obesity, again to this group, and sedentary lifestyle. Again have put into this group nowadays. So again I will recap rapidly. The risk factors can be divided into two types. Non-modifiable risk factors being a male gender, advanced age, and family history, and the proven one, hypercholesteremia, hypertension, and cigarette smoking, the diabetic, obesity, and sedentary lifestyle as well. Those are the risk factors for developing myocardial injury. So we'll see how coronary blood flow occurs and normal coronary blood flow. As we all know, how much of cardiac output going to our left and right heart right now. Yes, they approximately 5% of cardiac output going into coronary circulation. That means if your cardiac output is somewhere around 5 liters, the 5% out of 5 liters, 250 ml right now go into per minute. Right now going to perfuse your right and left myocardium. So 250 of oxygen blood going to the right and left ventricle. Your coronary perfusion can be double, triple, up to 4 times during the exercise. That means it can go up to nearly 1 liter of 1 liter per minute during the exercise or vigorous cardiac activity. So the coronary blood flow about 5% of cardiac output, that means 250 ml, can go up to 1 liter during the exercise as well. So, but the coronary perfusion, even though I mentioned 250 ml per minute, it is not uniform in every second. During the systolic, the blood flow to the ventricle will be minimized. During the diastolic, blood flow to the ventricle will increase. I will explain it how it happens. This is your ventricle, this is your aorta, this is ventricular wall. This is your coronary artery, arise from here. Right coronary artery arise from right coronary cusp, right aortic cusp. Left coronary artery arise from left aortic cusp. So, after rising from there, they come in as an epicardial vein initially, then it crosses the wall to supply the subendocardial portion. It initially comes as epicardial vein. You can see once your heart remove, once somebody had to remove from the body during the postmortem, you can see the vessel outside the wall. Those are called epicardial vessels. Once it incorporates into the myocardium, it can supply to the subendocardial area. During the systolic, the aortic valve will be open. During the systolic, aortic valve will be open. Pressure here should be more than here to eject the blood. To eject the blood, pressure within the ventricle should be more than pressure within the aorta. Because of that, the blood from this here to here will be cut off. Because blood has to travel from low pressure area to high pressure area. Because of that, during the systolic, left ventricle subendocardial perfusion totally cut off. I will repeat it again. During the systolic, ventricle should generate higher pressure than the aorta because aortic valve is open right now. In order to eject the blood, we have to have higher pressure here and low pressure here. From low pressure system to high pressure system, transport of blood is impossible. Because of that, the left coronary artery subendocardial area, the perfusion will be zero during the systolic. So, I will draw here what happened to the coronary blood flow during the systole and diastole. This part represents the systole. This is aorta, aortic pressure gradient. It gradually reduced from 100 to 80. Once it reduces to 80, the aortic valve will open. With that, the ejection is start. The pressure rapidly rising up to 120 in the aorta. Then here's valve closing, creating dichotic notch, and gradually diminish during the diastole because of blood flow now ejected to the peripheral circulation. The same time, what happened in the left ventricle during the diastole, blood pressure maintaining because ventricle pressure is less, but with the isovolumetric contraction, the pressure generating within the ventricle is very high. At the end of the isovolumetric contraction, the pressure is too much high. Because of that, the totally cut off of the subendocardial blood supply. Then the ejection start. The gradually reduces the intraventricular cavity pressure and aortic pressure gradually increasing. Because of that, coronary perfusion gradually goes up. Then once the aortic valve closed, ventricle start to relax. then you have to have very high blood flow during the diastole. That means once aortic valve is closed. But it is little bit different when coming to the right ventricle. Throughout the cardiac cycle, right ventricular wall tension is less because right ventricles has to pump against the pulmonary circulation resistance, Left ventricle has to pump against the systemic vascular resistance. Systemic vascular resistance approximately 10 times is higher than pulmonary vascular resistance. Because of that, the pulmonary vascular resistance is low. Because of that, right ventricular system pressure low, which is very less than the aortic pressure. Because of that, throughout the cardiac cycle, the left coronary vein right coronary vein going to be supply right endocardium and subendocardium wall. So this is the picture for right ventricle. This is the picture for left ventricle. This is picture for aortic pressure change during the cardiac cycle. So the left ventricle is the most vulnerable area. Left ventricle is the most vulnerable area of getting ischemia due to compression. Left ventricle is the most vulnerable area. Okay, one thing I want to highlight. Right coronary artery mainly supply into the right side of the heart and inferior part of the heart, and the inferior intraventricular septum part. I will repeat it again. The right ventricle arises from the right coronary cusp, right aortic cusp, and come through the right side of the heart and supply the base of the heart and posterior intraventricular septum as well, posterior part. Because of that, it can supply SA node, AV node, part of the conduction system as well, major part of the conducting system as well. Because of that, if your patient getting right coronary artery occlusion, the main manifestation, one of the main manifestation will be cardiac arrhythmia or bradycardia. Right coronary artery supplied SA node, nearly about 60 to 80% of people, and AV node as well, and major conduction system, and posterior intraventricular septum. This is the one which decides the dominance of the heart. If somebody says your heart is right dominant, the supply of the posterior intraventricular septum will be from right coronary artery. You can't say right now, but one day if you are underwent, I don't expect to be it. But if accidentally it happened, if you underwent coronary angiogram, you can see whether you are right coronary dominant or left coronary dominant. So, if your patient getting right coronary infarction, the main features will be conducting abnormalities. But the major part of the left ventricle supplied by left coronary artery. If your left coronary artery got diseased, and if you are developing left coronary ischemia and myocardial infarction, major external manifestation will be angina. In addition to that, poor inability to maintain the adequate cardiac output or ejection fraction. So, we'll see how myocardial oxygen demand and delivery change with the cardiac cycle. How it will change. During the cardiac cycle, what happens is your ventricle, this is your ventricle, this is your aorta, this is your pulmonary vein. I am talking about the right ventricle. Pulmonary vein drain into the left ventricle and start to eject. Once blood came into this left ventricle, the radius of the left ventricle will increase. According to Laplace law, pressure generated with inside the spherical proportionate to wall tension divided by radius. Wall tension somewhere here. That means if your radius increase, the tension should increase in order to give given pressure, in order to produced given pressure. For a while we think given pressure is 100 millimeter mercury. Initial radius I think 0.5. I am not mentioned about the unit. The tension which need to produce this pressure is 50 millimeter mercury here. Tension which need to produce this much of pressure. But for a while we think we have high venous return. Because of that radius will increase. Right now your radius is 1. The tension divided by 100 millimeter mercury. The tension now developed is nearly about 100, 2 times. That means if your radius is doubled, the tension will be double. When your tension increase, as you already know, the perfusion will be diminished, because the tension will determine whether to perfuse that ventricle during the systolic or not. So it is very, very important to know what is this law called? Laplace law. It is very, very important to know the Laplace law in order to determine how much of tension develop the ventricle. What is about the heart rate? When heart rate increase, what happened? For a while we think only single contraction during the high heart rate. When heart rate increase, the venous return again will be reduced. Because of that, the radius will be reduced. Because of less radius, the tension which need to generate same pressure will be reduced. So your myocardial stress per beat will reduce. I will repeat it again. Due to high heart rate, the relaxation time, diastolic time will be reduced. So venous return will be reduced. With reduced venous return, the radius will be reduced. Because of that, tension will be reduced to produce the same pressure. So that means with the high heart rate, per single contraction, the oxygen demand goes down. But it was offset by increase in the heart rate. Per minute, work demand will be increased. So having higher heart rate also not good. Having high radius also not good. Having high tension also not good. So you have to prevent being dilation of the ventricle and having high heart rate of your heart, and having high tension also not good. So the oxygen supply to the myocardium, you can calculate the oxygen supply to the myocardium. We can call it as oxygen flux to the myocardium. Your 1 gram of hemoglobin can carry approximately 1.39 ml of oxygen. 1.39 of ml of oxygen into 1.39 ml of oxygen into hemoglobin concentration, Hb concentration, into cardiac output, coronary, here it should be coronary blood flow, plus in addition to hemoglobin bound oxygen, there is a little bit of dissolved oxygen as well. The amount of dissolved oxygen is equal to 0.03 into partial pressure of oxygen in blood into coronary blood flow for that amount, coronary blood flow. So you can take coronary blood flow out here and hemoglobin into Hoffman's constant into and 0.03 into partial pressure of oxygen. Here I thought approximate oxygen saturation, hemoglobin saturation 100%. You have to add it to here as well, to saturation. So I will repeat it again. oxygen flux equal 1.39 ml into hemoglobin concentration into coronary blood flow into oxygen saturation plus 0.03 into partial pressure of oxygen in the arterial blood into coronary blood flow. From here you can identify amount of oxygen going to the both myocardium right now. Out of that going amount, the return amount approximately contain, here the saturation approximately 100%, that means 100 divided by 100. The return blood approximately containing 70% of saturation, that means 70% will approximately 70% will be returned back into the ventricle via coronary sinus. So we will see what is the pathophysiology of myocardial ischemia. What is the pathophysiology of myocardial ischemia? I already told what are the factors will increase the demand, how was the blood supply, and what is the amount of oxygen flux to the myocardium. Here we are going to check what is the pathophysiology of myocardial ischemia. Normally your epicardial vein, right and left epicardial vein is their major, right and left ventricle, left coronary artery. Epicardial vein, I will draw like this. Approximately width is 2 to 4 millimeter in diameter. The approximate diameter of your epicardial vein is 2 to 4 millimeters. So that is the one which are going to repair during your coronary bypass grafting. So you can develop exertional angina once it becomes less than, once is approximately 1 millimeter diameter. You can develop exertional angina when it becomes 1 millimeter diameter. That means approximately 50 to 60% reduction of diameter and about 75 reduction of cross-sectional area. Cross-sectional area. I will explain it how it happened. Here it reduces the diameter, not the whole area. Once diameter is reduced from, it is 2 to half, that means 50 to 60% reduction of diameter or 75% reduction of the cross-sectional area, you can develop chest failure. But it is happening most of the time during exertion. I am discussing here about the myocardial occlusion without developing collaterals. If we are developing collateral, this story will be totally different. If this happens suddenly, there is no time to develop collateral, you will develop exertional dyspnea. Then, if your luminal area reducing to 0.65, not 1 millimeter, if it is reduced into 0.65 in diameter or reduction of diameter 75% diameter reduction or 90% reduction of cross section area. If your diameter reduced from 2 to 0.65 or again the luminal area reduced from 1 to 0.75, 100% to 0.75, or your cross-sectional area reduced to 90%, you can develop resting angina. This is exertional angina. Okay. Without collateral, if your coronary artery become 0.65, you will develop resting angina as well. So, in addition to that, this is the coronary artery narrowing area. Even with this one, your cholesterol deposition of the vessels is not uniform. Usually one side cholesterol deposition is more and there is another free wall as well. Because of that, once your sympathetic system activate, the coronary vessels can, this free wall can narrow. The free wall can move and your luminal area will be further reduced. But unfortunately, fortunately, when coming to the coronary circulation, there is a thing called autoregulation. The generation of the waste product in the coronary circulation will kept those vessels expand. Myogenic theory and metabolic theory of autoregulation will be help to maintain the coronary perfusion. So, what are the clinical features of myocardial occlusion, myocardial vessel occlusion? The three main clinical features is number one, angina. You can develop palpitation. And feature of heart failure. Heart failure means SOB, shortness of breath. Those are the major clinical manifestation of myocardial occlusions. So, if your patient develop this much of vein size, artery size, can have resting angina, can have palpitation, rarely can have shortness of breathing as well. And once it further narrowing, you can have even resting angina, sometimes called unstable angina. So, other than those factors, patient can develop myocardial ischemia due to coronary ostial disease. That means the origin of the artery we call coronary ostial, the osteitis or arteritis, the thrombus in the coronary ostium, or vasospasm, or dissection of the aorta. Blood can seep through the arterial wall and it can occlude the coronary vein. So those are also can precipitate, can have myocardial underperfusion with those conditions without luminal narrowing. So you have to keep in mind those as well. So I will repeat it again rapidly. Your patient can have angina, palpitation or shortness of breath. It may be due to luminal narrowing or it may be due to origin problem, that means coronary artery osteitis or arteritis at the coronary artery or dissection of the aorta or thrombus in the ostia or rarely vasospasm like Prinzmetal angina. That's all.